There are over 15 characters in SUPERVIVE, all with varying levels of difficulty. Some are good to pick up and play, while others require a bit more of game knowledge. So let's go through each character from worst to best that you should consider playing as a beginner in SUPERVIVE. Starting off with Void, I think he might be the worst character for you to initially pick up in SUPERVIVE as a beginner. This is because he's just straight up one of the most complicated characters in the game. He doesn't really have a dash because his dash is more of a utility teleport, whereas almost every other character, or I believe actually every other character in the game, has a dash that functions pretty simply. You just put yourself from one place to another through just dashing through the air. His is different, and I think that is the main reason why a lot of players are going to struggle. You're going to get spiked more because you're not used to other movement techs, and it's overall just going to be a worse experience when you first pick up the game. Now, it's not just that I think is going to make him really difficult to pick up as a beginner. I also think he just has hard abilities to really grasp and hit as well. I mean, his M1 goes through walls, which is really nice, but then you start looking at whatever he puts on the ground, like the black hole thing, and then exploding it later. People have a really easy time just running out of that, and if you don't hit your right-click stun, you really struggle to create any other value with the rest of his kit. Now, the one thing I really do like about his kit is that his ultimate is really strong, and that's probably the easiest thing to understand in his kit. But the problem is, because of how long it takes to cast, once people kind of learn what his ultimate is, they're going to know just to run away from the guy. So overall, I think Void is probably going to be one of the weaker characters for new players. That being said, though, when you do actually get good with him, he does actually become pretty darn good, and he's been receiving a lot of buffs. I don't really think he's going to get nerfed anytime soon. So if you're willing to put in the work and try to learn the game from Void's perspective, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's definitely not for everyone, and you're going to struggle quite a bit if you go through with trying to learn Void. Now, let's move on to Jin, who is like a stealthy assassin character. It's actually what he was called before the beta. He used to be called Stealth Assassin, and I think it's pretty fitting for how he plays. The reason why I think he's actually pretty difficult is that he doesn't really have any range potential. He has his right click that'll send you to someone else's position if you hit them, but it's going to be kind of hard to hit that if you don't really know the projectile speed, what you really want to hit, because it's also easy to kind of just die if you go too far. It's very difficult to pick up this character really quickly, and I personally struggle with him a lot, at least when I first started. Because of that, I mean, because he's an all melee combo and everything revolves around him hitting his double E combo, at least that's what I have it bound to, with all of that being so front focused on one ability, it's so easy to be feast or famine, hit or miss, to do absolutely nothing if you're completely new to the game, that I think it's just really difficult to pick up. I mean, not to mention his ultimate as well, which is literally just a clone of himself that he can also pilot. It's really clunky and hard to work with, but if you are good with it, it could be really strong at the same time. The thing is, I just think it's too much. It's DTM, doing too much for a character. I just think there's better options in the melee department as well, which, I mean, we'll go into the next one, which is Brawl. I still think he's incredibly difficult to really pick up and play, and not a lot of people are able to do it when they're first playing the game, but I do think he still has a few more options than Jin, which makes him a little bit more approachable for a new player. That being said, you have to know combos to do really anything good on this character. You have to know that you want to use his chain into a dash, into a slam, and you want to make sure you hit that slam over the abyss to send him down, but if you don't hit it right, like all of this yapping I'm doing right now, you're probably lost. Imagine if you actually tried to do that with the character. Now, I think it's a little bit easier to do something in the neutral fight when you don't really know what's going on, because at least you have a ranged option compared to Jin. The thing is, this character is far from easy. This character is very far from easy, but if you see his sword and you're like, wow, that looks really cool, you should probably play Brawl, because I think people will have an easier time picking him up than Jin, so you'll have a better use of your time, at least early on. Now, you're going to catch a theme here. Melee characters, I tend to think, are pretty darn difficult in SUPERVIVE to just be picking up. And that's why next we're going to be talking about Oath. Oath is a really strong character. Do not let me say that because characters are difficult that they're not strong. Almost every character, maybe besides Jin so far, I think is one of the strongest characters in the game. Just for beginner players, you're going to have a lot of struggles with it because you have to go through the punches. You have to roll through the punches for a few hours until you know what you can and cannot do in this game. It took me a while too. But Oath, I mean, he's one of the harder ones to get for really new players as well. The only reason why I put him so much higher on the list than some of these other characters is because, I mean, he's so strong right now in the meta, in the numbers, that I think he's a little forgiving. I could see this changing in the near future. The thing is, Oath is all about knowing what to block with your shield, knowing what is worth blocking, what's not worth blocking. And if he does get the nerfs that I think he deserves, and you lose your shield to stuff you really shouldn't be using your shield for, he's going to feel significantly worse than he actually is, especially for newer players. Now, it's not only that though, because I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the shield. The shield is only one part of his multifaceted kits, and it's not very straightforward in design either. I mean, you look at Oath and he looks like the big Reinhardt Paladin Overwatch guy that wants to put his shield in front of his whole team while they shoot people. But in reality, that's not really what he is. Now, if we're going to stick with the Overwatch, connection here, he's more like if you took Brig and Diva together and made that the character, maybe with a little bit of Ryan frontline presence, but it really depends on the meta. And because of that, I think a lot of beginner players, they see this character and they have this character power fantasy regarding Oath, but it's not one-to-one with how Oath actually plays in a competitive environment. He is very strong if you learn how to block different things, stronger than really any other character we've talked about so far, but getting there will take you multiple hours. Moving on though, we're finally going to start talking about some other DPS characters, starting off with Jewel. And the reason why I think Jewel is kind of difficult is that all of her damage is weighted around the passive and dash that she has. It's just really difficult to just pick up and play. You're going to have to do a lot of reading before you play Jewel. And if you guys are anything like me, you don't really read. You just kind of look at the character, play a game, feel it out, and then you're like, oh, I like the idea of it, and then go. But the thing is with Jewel, you're gonna do nothing, literally nothing, if you don't read this kit. If you miss all of your cooldowns, you do nothing. If you hit all of your cooldowns, you do a lot. The big thing is you have to hit realistically 4 M1s, or I think it's like 2 M1s and a right click to generate your 4 stacks of charge. And then after that, you do a lot of damage if you hit your dash. If you don't hit your dash, it's a GG. If you miss all your abilities, it's a GG. If you mess up your ult and go in too far, it's a GG, because then you have to dash out and then you do no damage. The thing is that she's very strong. She is very, very strong if you know what to do on the character. But if you don't, she arguably could be one of the worst characters in the game. Very polarizing character, but I think for beginners, they're going to struggle a little bit until they learn how to play the kit. Now, moving on to another DPS, we have Shiv. Shiv is kind of simple. You want to just keep hitting your shots, keep hitting your dashes. There's nothing too much to it. The problem is that because it's all about hitting every single one of your shots, the moment that you miss an empowered dash shot, you lose all of your mobility, you lose a significant amount of your damage, and because of that, you're kind of a sitting duck that doesn't really do anything for your team. On top of that, it can be really difficult to get used to, especially when you're first starting the game, because it's a lot of movement, it's a lot of flicking around, it's a lot of precision, especially if you're new to top down like me. It's really hard to just be able to pick up and get a lot of value out of this character. That being said, once you do learn it, it's not too bad. It's not like Void where you have to hit everything, but also be an incredibly smart player. With Shiv, it's really like, you don't really have to think a whole lot. You just have to see target, dash, hit shot, repeat again and again and again. It's difficult. It's not quite the hardest thing in the world, but there's nothing really more to Shiv's kit. It's just like, hit your shots, bro. Like, I got nothing really else for you. But now we're moving on to Bishop. And the reason why I think Bishop is kind of difficult is that she does just so many different things. She wants to really shoot and get those empowered rockets from afar, be like an AoE sniper, but she also needs to get in there and punch to create opportunities for her team, and finding all of the different interactions with her punch to really generate the most value possible is probably one of the hardest characters to really pick up and play in the game, because you always have these constant questions in your head. I don't think there's any other character in the game that has to juggle as many responsibilities as Bishop does, maybe besides Oath and maybe besides like Void. But because of all these things, I think she's kind of difficult compared to these other characters that we're going to be talking about after her. But again, if you're thinking about like Jhin and Brawl, like at least she has ranged opportunities, and she's not nearly as hard as some of those other characters when you're first picking her up. Now this one might be a little interesting, but we're talking about Hudson, Big Huddy. We all know the point and click brat enthusiast. The main thing with Hudson is that he just clicks, he holds down the trigger, and he watches health bars burn. Not really that difficult of a character to understand conceptually. The problem is he doesn't really have as much mobility as we have seen in other characters in the past, and you can get caught out a lot because of that. The thing is that he probably will melt a lot of beginner players because they're not really going to know when to respect his damage, how to approach a Hudson. And I actually think he'll be a pretty decent pick if you're first starting out in SUPERVIVE, but I don't think he's going to be nearly as strong as some other characters being Kingpin. Kingpin, because realistically, Kingpin is a really easy to understand character as well. He's your standard hook guy that you see in almost every PvP game at this point, I swear. The big thing is that Kingpin is really good if you hit a hook, and because you're playing against new players as a beginner, it's going to be pretty easy to hit that hook. But eventually you're going to get to a point where players are going to know how to dash around your hook, and if you miss it, now the character in terms of approach gets a lot more difficult. Now, that being said, if you do manage to hit the hook and you do manage to get pretty darn consistent with it, you're just going to win your team games. Like, you're just going to create engagements where it's 4v3, the enemy and Luna can't res anything, and you will just win games if you continue to hit hooks when you're an absolute beginner. To be honest, this is the character I played. I played Kingpin when I first started playing the game because I was like, dude, I can just solo carry games if I do well enough. And I mean, that's where I am now. I mean, I again went away from Kingpin and just started playing Oath and Zeph. But like, when you first start playing the game, I think Kingpin is a really solid pick. I think the higher you go in MMR, the harder he gets, but he still can be pretty solid. So I think Kingpin is a really good starting point for a lot of players. The next one, we have Zeph, which I think a lot of veterans that may be watching this video might disagree with what I'm saying here. But the thing is that Zeph is really difficult to play against good players, but he's really easy to play against new players since you're not going to get caught out a lot and you have a lot of healing. You have a lot more healing than every other character in the game. You're going to be able to bail everyone else out that you're playing with that are also beginners, and you're not really going to get pressured at all. You're just going to get to keep throwing nades, keep looking to set up opportunities for your team on top of just keeping them alive. And the big thing with Zeph is that you can force beginning players, but players that are new to the game, you can force them into wars of attrition that they don't quite understand yet, and you will almost always win the neutral game because you're just going to keep your team alive with your healing for so long. That being said, you can only really do so much to help new players if they're going to be inting. If they're going to be dashing and gliding over the abyss and getting spiked, you can't heal that. So I could see that maybe I'm giving Zeph a little bit too much credit, especially for new players. But the thing is that Zeph, when you get to anything higher than just brand new to the game, he'll be better than Luna in every single way. This is the one situation where Luna is better in brand new environments. It's the only situation where Luna as a protector is a stronger character than Zeph. You will never see me telling someone that is a veteran at this game to be maining a Luna. But today, at the end of this list, you'll just have to wait and see. But now we're going to move on to Myth, which I think is just a really great start pick. Maybe the best starting pick for anyone in the entire game. Great hunter, has great neutral game, super consistent, a little bit more difficult than other DPS characters, but the thing is, she's a little bit more consistent than some other characters we talked about today, like maybe Hudson or maybe like Jhin and Brawl. You're never really going to go wrong when you have a Myth on your team. And I think it forces you, the reason why I think she might be the most ideal character to start on is she forces you to think when you're aiming. She forces you to think about the utility that you're using because it's all about zoning enemies and forcing them into difficult positions around the map. So it also helps you learn the map better too. And she's not too difficult to the point where she has anything that's too out of the ordinary that's difficult to understand. That is why I think Myth is a great starting point. If you like DPS characters, but you also want to think a little bit more, use that big brain that you have, Myth is a very good starting point. But all right, moving on to Ghost. I think Ghost is a super easy character to understand, especially if you come from other FPS games like Overwatch or Rainbow Six Siege, Valorant, CSGO. All of those games, I think Ghost is your character. He's your standard point and click character, the guy with the AR that just gets things done. And I know a lot of players that might be watching this video probably got nagged on by your League of Legends friends to play a top-down game and you really don't want to play it. But trust me, if you play this character, you're going to feel like at home. I think it's really easy to get a lot of value in neutral fights with this character. But the craziest thing though, is that I still think there are even simpler and better characters to pick up when you're first playing the game. Even for you CSGO and Valorant players out there, you guys still could have a better character that isn't the point and click character. So now we're going to be moving on to what those characters could be, which is Celeste. And I think Celeste is one of those characters that's simply insane for high elo. She'll always have a place there, but also just really good for new players as well. She has tons of mobility. She has 2 get out of jail free cards with her wall and her ultimate, and the M1 literally aims for you. You have aim assist on her M1. So with Celeste, I mean, sure, she has a little bit more concept she has to deal with compared to Ghost. She doesn't do quite as much damage at face value, but at the same time, sometimes when you're first playing the game, the character literally plays for you. Eventually, you're going to have to learn, and you can do a lot of fun stuff, though, with the character, too. So I think Celeste has the perfect balance in the game as a hunter, where she has a very high skill floor, but also a really high skill ceiling. So you can really see who plays Celeste every now and then compared to someone who mains Celeste. So again, I think she's another one that's a really good start to main on compared to maybe some of the rest that we see on this list. Moving on to the next, we have Felix. And the hardest part about Felix is getting close. Aside from that, it's easy to aim on him. He's super tanky if you want him to be, and it's easy to understand really all of it that he wants to do. Now, when you start getting to higher elo, like a lot of these other characters that I'm going to be talking about that are following Felix, they're going to start getting a lot more difficult. But when I'm talking about the first 20 games you play, characters like Felix, characters like Celeste are gonna do wonders for you because you can focus less on all of this aim, all of this mechanical stuff that you need to do, and focus more on running the map, learning different powers, learning items, and all of the other systems that you're gonna have to go through, which I do have videos on the channel you can anticipate, or they're probably already up there, so go look around there. But characters like this are the real reason why I think, beginning out in the game, they're just really strong. You can kill what's good, and you don't have to really worry too much. But now we're going to move on to the last two characters. And the one that I'm putting in the number 2 spot is Shrike. Now, this is the Thanos characters for new players. In alpha playtests, the number 1 character that was complained the most about for new players was Shrike. And the reason why is because in a long-range poke neutral game, where players don't know how to play against her, where people don't use their dash around cover and they're just sitting in the open, Shrike can easily put up numbers that could rival that of Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Michael Jordan combined. She puts up numbers that no other person ever could. And the thing is that she falls off the moment that people do get good. Because literally, I'll tell you guys the secret. The whole way that you beat Shrike is you play around cover, and the moment that you can close the distance and get in her face, you just throw yourself at her, and she doesn't have anything she can do unless she dashes away. And then what do? You repeat the process until she can't dash away anymore. And if you don't get marked and don't get 2-tapped, you're good. The problem is beginners, they get 2-tapped because they don't really know how the character functions yet. And that's no disrespect to you. I also got 2-tapped a lot. She just frags out, and it's just when players don't know what to do, she'll continue to do so. The moment you close the distance and pressure her literally 1 bit, she does absolutely nothing compared to every other character in the game. And that's why she's pretty low on, if I were to put her on an actual power tier list. For beginners, though, really strong. The thing is, if you thought Shrike was good, there's still one more character. There's different tiers. There's S tier, there's Thanos tier, and then there's Jesus tier. And Aluna for new players is the Jesus character. No one knows at this level how to counter her because it does take a few steps. I think Aluna is easily the best character for beginners because you're just going to keep resurrecting your friends again and again and again, unless they get spiked over the abyss, which, I mean, then you kind of can't do anything. On top of this, though, not only does she res a lot, she does pretty good damage now, too. So it's not like you can't frag out on the character either. It's just like the moment that someone dies on your team in a higher elo environment, someone is going to know that you should immediately dash onto that wisp and deny her from picking it up. Because then, why would you play Aluna over playing Zeph so that your player wouldn't die in the first place? The thing is, I tend to want to live in reality and not what we think we should be playing in a longer term setting. So that's why I think Aluna is really good for beginners, is because beginners don't know the answers yet. Just, I warn you all, this is not me telling you to play Aluna. I hate Aluna. This is just me telling you this is the character that will win a lot of games when you're first playing the game. And you're going to be seeing her a lot. Just understand that if you can counter her, you don't need to play her, but she is a pretty darn good option. So that is going to be the end of our tier list thing today. Hopefully this was very helpful to you all that are all beginning to learn the game. And if you have any other questions, please just leave them in the comments down below, or look at all of my videos that I have on the channel that'll probably answer one of your questions. I probably am streaming live here on YouTube as well as at twitch.tv/PazSwagger if you're interested. But I hope to see you guys all around. Thank you guys all so much for watching. But until next time, I've got to peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.